Check this out. Quote, I was one of the service chiefs when the Don't Ask, Don't Tell compromise was reached in 1993. Until then, every person coming into the military was asked questions directed at establishing sexual orientation, and admitted homosexuals were automatically rejected. Thus, the don't ask part of the rule actually means gays no longer have to lie. So if you're gay, you don't have to lie about that in the military now? Does General Merrill McPeak, former Chief of Staff of the Air Force, really believe that's true? Because it's totally, provably, obviously not true.
In Iraq, during the height of the insurgency, the Air Force conducted a search of my private emails solely to determine if I had violated Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and to gather whatever evidence they could use against me. I was relieved of my duties, leading nearly 200 airmen.
And the proponents of this policy say that you personally, you being gay, has a negative effect on your squadron's good order and discipline. How do you feel about that?
Not one single person that I'm assigned with in my squadron or that I fly with in my fighter squadron knew about this case until this moment.
Even if General McPeak's only recently acquired information about Don't Ask, Don't Tell was garnered from watching cable news, say 9 p.m. Eastern on MSNBC in the last few months, even just that would have provided him with direct proof, direct evidence that people do have to lie if they're in the military and gay right now. That even being totally closeted is not enough to stop the witch hunting of people in the military to drum them out of the service. So General McPeak's op-ed in favor of keeping Don't Ask, Don't Tell was a strange addition to the debate today. But another one of the service chiefs from the time that Don't Ask, Don't Tell was put into place is also trying to make himself part of the debate now, to similarly awkward effect. He is General Carl Mundy. He's the former commandant of the Marine Corps. He's been op-edding against repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell. General Mundy's current advocacy against Don't Ask, Don't Tell. General Mundy is famous in civilian life for two other things, meaning he's famous among civilians for two other things. First, he once issued an order banning married people from joining the Marines. He ended up having to rescind that after the whole country went, say what now? He's perhaps even more famous, though, for this. On October 31st, 1993, as Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Carl Mundy went on 60 Minutes to explain the lack of promotion of minority officers in his branch of the service. On camera, General Mundy explained that result as follows, and I quote, in the military skills, we find that the minority officers do not shoot as well as the non-minorities. They don't swim as well. And when you give them a compass and send them across the terrain at night in a land navigation exercise, they don't do as well as that. They don't do as well at that sort of thing. That's what General Carl Mundy is most famous for in civilian life. He is the man who, as Commandant of the Marine Corps, the Pentagon was forced to apologize for because he went on 60 Minutes to say that minorities can't shoot or swim or read a compass, not like white people can.
I would commend to the members of this committee an op-ed written by Carl E. Mundy, Jr., retired four-star general and former commandant of the U.S. Marine Corps.
Joining us now is Clifford Alexander. He was Secretary of the United States Army under President Carter and Chairman of the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission under President Johnson. Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for coming back on the show. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you very much, Rachel.
What do you make of senators and other people engaged in this fight now over Don't Ask, Don't Tell, citing former military officers as a way to try to defend the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy?
They have a new approach now. The approach is that this is going to be difficult because we are in two wars. If we were at peace, their argument would be that we must not try this social experiment because you can't really tell if it's going to work during peacetime. Their approach is to somehow avoid what would make American men and women in service act in an honorable way, be able to not lie to themselves and lie to those around them. And there is nothing but, in a sense, some hatred, a little bit of fear, and a great deal of ignorance that is driving this force to keep this Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy in place.
General McPeak's op-ed today, I thought was important because he did his arguments, and I don't mean this as an insult to General McPeak at all, but his arguments were strange in my view. He argued, for example, that warriors are inspired by male bonding. And that don't ask, don't tell will interfere with male bonding and therefore weaken warrior culture. As a former Secretary of the Army, I just have to ask your response to that argument.
Well, it's as if he's watching too many horror movies. It just seems to me that he must be living in a world that is unlike any world any of us realistically see. He, of course, excludes all women from a capacity to be great soldiers and great and brave people, as they have been in many wars with this country and with other countries. But beyond that, what is so bothersome about both of the generals that you cite is that these men were in charge of the welfare of so many people, that this kind of narrow-minded, ignorant thinking is allowed to really judge not obviously just gays, but all people in the military, that their judgment is somehow better than, according to these senators, the good sense that would say you want men and women, whatever their particular sexual orientation, to be able to serve according to their skills. Now, we shouldn't be studying this. They've been talking about having a long study. The President of the United States, instead of calling for a study, should have said to the Secretary of Defense, tell me in 30 days how we can get this legislation moving on the Hill, but don't hold this until December. The President of the United States, according to Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution, is the Commander-in-Chief. He is in charge of the Army and the Navy. When the Constitution was written, there wasn't an Air Force. It is quite clear it is up to him to set the tone, and it is up to him to set what we call, very importantly in this democracy, civilian control. And that means that the civilians, the people who are elected, are the ones who set the particular way things should be in the services. You do not look to the military people in uniform to set the policy. You look to them for their expertise, you look for them for good judgment, and then you, as the person who is elected head of this government, say to them, this is how it is going to be. That is what civilian control is all about. Otherwise, you have the situation that have taken place in several countries where the military is running the government. That's the last thing we want. And we certainly don't want the McPeaks and the Mundys, that kind of military person running the government or, frankly, running the services that they ran. The kind of ignorance that was spewed out in that op-ed piece, the kind of ignorance that Mundy has attributed to himself as a head of a service is appalling, and it should be described as such. It shouldn't be the Pentagon really saying, I apologize for this person. It should be the Pentagon condemning this kind of activity. We need to get passionate about these things. We can't just say, well, he might have been off that day. If you read this piece in the Times, you wonder what logical world this man lives in. He clearly didn't know what he was talking about. He has no empirical proof, nor is there any empirical proof. In fact, all of the proof is on the other side, because so many countries don't go to this ludicrous nonsense of worrying about what is the sexual orientation of who's next to the man or woman in uniform.
Clifford Alexander, former Secretary of the Army. This is the second time that you've joined us on this show, and in both cases I've been bowled over by your generosity, your time, and by your arguments. Thank you, sir.
Finally, General Petraeus, let me ask you, you said recently in an interview that you didn't mind serving alongside men and women who happen to be gay. Does that mean that you would be comfortable with the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell?
If I could clarify what I did say, what I was actually trying to say is that I'd served with some CIA officers, actually, who were known to be gay and one who's known to be lesbian. And, you know, after the 10 seconds of awareness wore off, the focus was on the professional attributes of these individuals. And so given, again, standards of personal conduct, a focus on human behavior, a focus on proper implementation. You know, I think that this is something that that can be worked through, frankly. And I'll lay this out to Congress. My thinking on this matter, I've been wrestling with this, as a lot of us have. We've done a lot of personal soundings. We've looked at the 25 or so countries, including Australia, the UK, Canada, Israel, some pretty good militaries that have all integrated, if you will, gays and lesbians into their militaries, but had very sensible and pragmatic policies. And I think that has been the key to the success of their efforts. But again, when I talk to probably the Senate Armed Services Committee, if asked, I'll lay out a pretty comprehensive view, my personal view at least, on this particular issue.
It sounds to me, though, if the review process of scouting out the opinions of soldiers, if they were to go to this soldier, that is you, it sounds like what you would tell them is that as long as it was carefully implemented, you would be comfortable.
Well, I'll lay that out again to the Senate Armed Services Committee. And
what, you don't want to tell it to a TV show first?
Well, I know you'd love to have that, but well, I think we'll allow the scoop to go to our members of Congress.
General